This morning, the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, PRIO, published its annual conflict report, and it covers every war and armed conflict on the planet going back to 1946. I was at the background briefing yesterday here in Oslo, and the numbers that they present are some of the worst since the Second World War. In 2025, researchers recorded 65 state-based conflicts. So that means that 65 separate wars where at least one government was involved, and that is the highest number ever recorded. Nearly 250,000 people were killed in direct battle violence last year, so that makes 2025 the third deadliest year since the end of the Cold War. More than 76,000 people were killed in deliberate, one-sided violence against civilians. 1 year earlier, that number was 14,000, so it's now more than 5 times as much as 12 months ago. And almost all of that increase is in Sudan, specifically in the city El Fasher in North Darfur. In the last week of October 2025, approximately 60,000 people were killed following a paramilitary takeover. UN investigators have described it as bearing all the hallmarks of genocide. Most people reading or watching this have never heard of El Fasher. It barely made the international news. 60,000 people, 1 week. And the world moved on, and I think that silence is worth naming here. The report also documents the return of wars between states. For decades, direct conflict between two governments was really rare, but in 2025 there were 8 of them. That is double the number from 2024, and it is the highest since 1946. India and Pakistan, Afghanistan and Pakistan, Cambodia and Thailand, Russia, Ukraine, Israel and Syria, and then there's those expanding confrontations across the Middle East. The researcher presenting the data, Siri Aas Rustad, she explained why she thinks that border conflicts are rising again. The world feels less supervised. The UN Security Council is not functioning, and American willingness to enforce international norms has weakened. And when there's no credible pressure from outside, countries with unresolved grievances are more likely to act on them. And then one of us asked her directly whether the current US administration bears some responsibility for these complicated trends. And she was careful, but her answer was clear. Less international collaboration, fewer functioning institutions, more protectionism. The data is beginning to show the consequences. When I asked whether she could find anything positive in this year's report, she said she could not, and that this was the first time she couldn't find any positive trend. I spent much of my professional life around these kind of questions as a journalist and as a diplomat, and I followed conflicts in Central and Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia and the Middle East for some 25 years, and I've seen what happens when outside attention and institutional pressure are removed from fragile situations. Things get worse. Rustad said, wars do end, but she could not say when, of course. She expects that this elevated level of violence may continue for another 5 or 10 years or so, but it's hard to say. The full PRIO report is available at PRIO.org and is worth reading. And I've written a longer piece on this and more today with more detail on definitions and data and what it means. And I'll add that link to this video post.